The first thing he saw was the shadow of blue and purple beneath her sleeve, an ugly, silent confession written across pale skin. Naya, the Apache warrior, had ridden into the dusty settlement of Dry Creek only to trade furs. But when his dark eyes landed on Eliza Harper, the quiet, 30-year-old widow who kept mostly to herself, he noticed something no one else seemed willing to see. Her hand trembled as she reached for the sack of flour on the store's counter. And when the sleeve of her worn calico dress shifted just slightly, the bruise on her wrist looked fresh, raw, and violent. The Old West was no place for softness, but there was something in Eliza's silence that unsettled him. She stood rigid as if afraid even of her own shadow, her honey-brown hair pinned too tightly at the nape of her neck, strands escaping like whispers of a life once freer. The storekeeper looked away, pretending not to notice. The other townsfolk busied themselves, offering forced cheer, as though Bruises were as natural as dust on the wind. Naya did not look away. The wind outside howled against the rattling glass, lifting sand across the wooden porch like claws scraping at the world. He had seen wounds of war, blood spilled in raids and retaliation. But this quiet torment carved into a woman's skin, was different. And it struck him harder than a blade. When Eliza realized he was watching, her eyes snapped to his. They were not the timid eyes of a beaten woman, not entirely. There was fire hidden there, an ember refusing to die. But her lips pressed tight, as though warning him not to speak. "Ma'am?" "Your change," the storekeeper muttered, pushing coins across the counter. Her hand shook as she scooped them up. And Naya noticed how she avoided using her left hand, how she guarded her ribs when she turned. As though even the act of breathing hurt outside, she lifted the sack of flour onto her wagon, wincing at the weight. Before she could climb onto the seat, Naya stepped forward. His shadow fell across her, tall and unyielding, his broad chest bare beneath the leather strap of his bow, dark hair falling loose past his shoulders. "You are hurt," he said in low English, his accent deep but clear. Her head jerked up, startled. "It's nothing." His gaze held hers, unmoving, piercing. Bruises are never nothing. For a moment, the mask cracked. Fear flashed across her face, not of him, but of something else, someone else. Her mouth opened, then closed again, words swallowed like secrets she couldn't afford to let slip. She climbed onto the wagon seat and slapped the reins, leaving him standing in the street, dust curling at his boots. But Naya was not a man who ignored signs. He had been raised to see what others missed, the track of a fox beneath dry leaves, the lie in a traitor's eyes, the silent language of suffering. And what he had seen today told him one truth: Eliza Harper was in danger. That night, as the moon rose over the desert and coyotes howled in the distance, Naya camped near the riverbank. The fire crackled low, but his mind would not rest. Her bruises replayed in his thoughts like a trail he could not abandon. He had intended to leave Dry Creek by dawn, to return to his people in the canyon lands. Yet something in him whispered that fate had tied him to the woman with fire in her eyes and chains on her body. Then came the sound, distant hooves pounding in the night. He rose, listening, every muscle coiled. A wagon rattled down the road too fast, its lantern swinging wildly. He caught sight of it in the moonlight, and his heart stopped. It was Eliza's wagon, and she wasn't alone. A man's shadow loomed beside her, gripping her arm hard enough that she nearly fell from the seat. The wagon didn't slow, it tore past the crossroads and into the dark hills. Naya's fists tightened around his bow. The bruises had not come from chance or accident. They had come from him, and now she was being dragged into the night. The wagon thundered into the hills, its wheels jolting over rocks and roots, the lantern swaying wildly as shadows clawed at the earth. Naya spurred his horse without hesitation, muscles tightening as the animal surged forward beneath him. The night air cut cold against his bare chest, but his focus was fixed only on the woman and the man dragging her into the darkness. Every hoofbeat echoed like a war drum in his ears. He leaned low, long black hair streaming back, tribal jewelry clinking against his skin with each movement. The desert stretched out vast and merciless, but he knew this land better than most. He tracked their path by instinct, the broken sagebrush, the faint dust trail illuminated by moonlight. The sound of Eliza's muffled cries carried faintly on the wind. At last, the wagon swerved off the main road and up a narrow ridge toward an abandoned mining camp. Naya slowed his pace, dismounting to move silently, his moccasins barely whispering against the earth. His bow was slung across his back, but he drew his knife instead, the blade glinting silver in the firelight of a small camp ahead. The wagon stood crooked near a half-collapsed shack, its lantern extinguished. Naya crouched behind a boulder, watching. Eliza was on the ground, her dress torn at the shoulder, hands bound with rope. She struggled to sit up, her eyes darting wildly, lips parted in ragged breaths. The man who held her was tall and broad, his coat dust-stained, his face hidden in shadow. "Why do you keep running, Eliza?" The man's voice boomed, low and harsh. "You know you belong to me." Eliza's voice cracked with defiance. "I don't belong to anyone, Caleb." The name struck Naya like a flint to tinder. Caleb Price. He had heard whispers of the man in Dry Creek, once a cattle foreman, now known for gambling debts, short tempers, and a trail of fights left behind in saloons. No one dared confront him, not openly. The bruises on Eliza's body suddenly made all the sense in the world. Caleb crouched in front of her, gripping her chin so hard her teeth clicked. "I gave you a roof when no one else would. You think you can walk away? You're mine." Her voice was little more than a whisper, but Naya caught it, sharp as an arrow slicing the night. "I'd rather die than be yours." Caleb slapped her, the crack splitting through the stillness. She fell sideways, her cheek red and swelling. Naya's grip on his knife tightened until the leather handle bit into his palm. Every instinct screamed to rush forward, to bury the blade in Caleb's throat, but he forced himself to breathe, to wait. One wrong move could cost Eliza her life. Caleb hauled her up again and pressed his mouth close to her ear. "Tomorrow you'll sign the papers. The ranch, the land, everything. Then we'll see how much fight you've got left." Land. The word stuck in Naya's mind like a thorn. This wasn't just cruelty, this was control, greed. Caleb wasn't only bruising her body. He was trying to strip her of her last piece of freedom. Eliza spat in his face. Caleb's rage erupted. He drew back his fist, ready to strike harder than before. That was when Naya moved. Silent as a mountain cat, he stepped from the shadows, knife gleaming in moonlight. His voice was low, steady, and filled with deadly promise. "Touch her again," he growled, "and you will not see another sunrise." Caleb froze, his fist still raised, eyes narrowing as they flicked toward the tall, shirtless figure with black hair tumbling past his shoulders. He recognized the stance instantly. Apache. Dangerous. Unyielding. For a heartbeat. The night was nothing but firelight, ragged breathing, and the thick tension of two predators circling. Eliza's eyes widened, relief and disbelief washing over her at once. She knew Naya had followed, but she hadn't expected him to stand between her and Caleb like a wall of stone. Caleb sneered. "This ain't your fight, Injun. Walk away before you find yourself 6 feet under." Naya stepped closer, his voice low but ringing like iron. "Her bruises are already graves enough. I will not let you dig more." The blade in his hand flashed. Caleb's grip faltered on Eliza's arm, and for the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. But Caleb Price wasn't a man who backed down easily. And Naya knew, as the firelight cast their shadows long across the desert floor, that this was only the beginning of a battle neither of them could walk away from. The fire cracked between them, sparks leaping skyward like tiny souls fleeing the tension of men ready to spill blood. Caleb's hand lingered in the air, fist still raised. But his eyes now locked on Naya, the Apache warrior, who had stepped from the darkness like a ghost of judgment. Naya's chest rose and fell slowly, every movement deliberate, steady as a mountain. His knife gleamed silver in the moonlight, and his long black hair rippled in the cool desert wind. The turquoise and bone beads strung across his chest rattled softly, as if warning Caleb with each sway. Eliza sat frozen on the dirt, breath heaving, the rope still cutting into her wrists. She stared between them, fear and hope warring in her eyes. Caleb finally lowered his fist, lips curling into a sneer. "You think one knife scares me?" His hand slipped to his hip, dragging a revolver from its holster. The metallic click thundered louder than the crackling fire. "I've killed bigger men for less." Naya did not flinch. His gaze stayed rooted to Caleb's eyes, not the gun. "Your hand shakes," he said quietly. Caleb's jaw clenched. "Because you fear truth," Naya continued, his voice low and steady as the desert wind. "You beat a woman, not warriors. You hide behind rope and paper, not courage." The words struck harder than any blow. Caleb's face darkened, rage boiling. "I'll gut you, savage." He raised the revolver dot in a blur. Naya moved. His arm shot forward, knife slicing through the air with the precision of a hawk diving for prey. The blade struck the revolver's barrel, knocking it aside just as Caleb squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, the bullet tearing harmlessly into the dirt. Eliza screamed. Naya lunged, closing the distance before Caleb could recover. The two men crashed together, fists and fury colliding in a storm of violence. Caleb was strong, his body built from years of ranch labor and brawls, but Naya fought with the coiled grace of a predator. Each strike was sharp, efficient, honed by years of survival in a land that punished weakness. Caleb's fist caught Naya's jaw, splitting his lip. Pain flared, copper filling his mouth, but Naya did not falter. He slammed his elbow into Caleb's ribs, driving the breath from his chest. They grappled, boots grinding into the dirt, firelight flickering over sweat and blood. Eliza crawled backward, desperate to escape the flailing limbs and shouts. The rope around her wrists cut deeper, but she ignored the pain. Eyes locked on the knife now lying inches from her hand where it had fallen in the struggle. Caleb shoved Naya back, spitting blood. He reached for his revolver again, but Naya tackled him, the weapon clattering across the ground. Caleb roared, smashing his forehead against Naya's. Stars burst across Naya's vision, but his grip held firm. He twisted, using Caleb's momentum to pin him hard against the wagon wheel. "Say you are a man now," Naya growled, his forearm pressed against Caleb's throat. "Say it as she watches you beg." Caleb choked, clawing at Naya's arm, veins straining in his neck. He snarled through gasps, "You'll die for this." The knife scraped across the dirt as Eliza's trembling fingers closed around its handle. She pulled it close, breath shallow, heart hammering in her chest. For the first time, the weapon was hers. Her eyes met Naya's. He gave the slightest nod with a cry that tore from the deepest part of her. Eliza slashed the rope at her wrists, the fibers snapping apart. She surged forward, knife shaking in her grip, and pressed it against Caleb's cheek. "Enough," she hissed, voice trembling with rage and freedom. "You will never lay a hand on me again." Caleb froze, chest heaving beneath the combined weight of Naya's strength and Eliza's blade. For the first time that night, true fear flickered in his eyes. The desert fell silent, the fire crackling the only witness, but Naya knew this fight was not finished. Men like Caleb didn't crawl away quietly. They struck back harder, dirtier, more desperate, and in the shadows beyond the firelight, the faint sound of more hoofbeats began to stir. The ground trembled faintly, a rhythm that did not belong to coyotes or the restless wind. Hoofbeats, many of them. Naya's head snapped up, his grip tightening on Caleb as the sound grew louder. The night, already tense, now carried the promise of fresh blood. Eliza staggered back, knife still clutched in her shaking hands, eyes darting toward the dark ridge above them. "More of his men," she whispered. "He brought them." Caleb's lips twisted into a cruel smile despite the weight of Naya's arm pressing into his throat. "You didn't think I came alone, did you?" His voice rasped, raw from the pressure. "They'll tear you apart, Savage. And she'll crawl back to me begging when you're gone." Naya's jaw clenched, but he did not flinch. Instead, he shifted his stance, slamming Caleb hard against the wagon once more to silence him. Dust rose, carrying with it the metallic tang of blood and the sharp scent of mesquite burning in the fire. "Stay behind me," Naya told Eliza in a low voice, his eyes never leaving the approaching riders. The first figures crested the ridge, 5 men on horseback, their silhouettes black against the silver moon. Rifles glinted in their hands, hats pulled low to mask their faces. The ground shook harder as they descended, dust swirling around their horses' hooves. Eliza's breath came fast, panic flooding her chest. She gripped the knife tighter, though her wrist still ached from the rope. "They'll kill us both," she whispered. Naya's dark eyes flicked to her, steady, grounding. "Not if we fight together." Her heart jolted. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not her late husband, not any man in Dry Creek. Always she had been told to endure, to submit, to keep her head down and survive. But Naya spoke as though her strength mattered, as though she was not just someone to protect but someone to fight beside. The riders pulled up in a half circle, their horses snorting, breath fogging in the chill night. One of them, a wiry man with a scar down his cheek, called out, "Caleb, what the hell's going on here?" "Who's the Injun?" Caleb wheezed, finally managing to bark out, "Shoot him! Kill him now." Naya shoved Caleb forward, using him as a shield. "Your leader bleeds like a coward," Naya called back, voice carrying across the firelight. "Is this the man you follow? A man who strikes women and hides behind others to fight his battles?" The men shifted uneasily in their saddles. A few glanced at Eliza, her torn dress, the fresh mark swelling across her cheek. They saw the truth written on her skin. The scarred man cursed under his breath. "Damn it, Caleb, you told us she was lying." "Bet she tried to cheat you." Caleb snarled, spitting blood. "She's mine. She owes me. The land isn't yours to take." Eliza's voice cut through the night, sharp as the blade in her hands. She stood taller now, shoulders squared despite her bruises. "That ranch was my father's. He left it to me, not you. My blood is in that soil. You think you can take it with your fists and your lies?" Her words struck deeper than any knife. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked at Caleb with doubt, others with disgust. Naya's hand tightened on his knife again, ready for the fight he knew could erupt at any second. But something else flickered through his thoughts. Respect. Eliza's fire was no longer hidden behind fear. It blazed in her voice and the defiance in her eyes. Caleb saw it too. His rage boiled over, his pride wounded deeper than his bruised flesh. "Shut up!" he bellowed, lunging toward her. Naya intercepted him in an instant, slamming Caleb back against the wagon wheel once more. The wood groaned under the impact. "Do you see now?" Naya shouted to the riders. His voice echoed like thunder against the canyon walls. "This man is no leader. He is a vulture, feeding on those weaker than him." The scarred rider hesitated, then lowered his rifle. Maybe this ain't our fight after all." 2 others followed suit, their rifles dropping to their sides. Only one man kept his gun raised, eyes darting between Caleb and Naya, torn between loyalty and truth. Caleb's face twisted with desperation. "You think he'll save you?" He spat at Eliza, veins straining in his neck. "You think this Injun cares about you?" "You're nothing but," Naya silenced him with a sharp shove, his voice cold as stone. "Enough. You have spoken too much already." The riders lingered, their choice hanging in the balance. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the ground. Eliza's knuckles whitened around the knife, her body trembling not with fear now, but with fury and resolve. And in that fragile silence, where loyalty, truth, and blood threatened to collide, Naya knew one thing for certain: the fight for Eliza's freedom had only just begun. The desert held its breath. Horses snorted, hooves pawing at the dirt as the riders hesitated. Torn between Caleb's barked orders and the truth laid bare in front of them, Naya stood like a mountain, chest heaving, the firelight painting his skin bronze and gold. His long black hair whipped in the night wind, tribal beads clinking softly as he pressed Caleb hard against the wagon wheel. Eliza stood just behind him, her torn dress fluttering, the knife trembling in her grip, but her eyes burned steady with defiance. "Shoot him!" Caleb roared, veins bulging in his neck. "Shoot the damn savage!" But the men didn't move. Their rifles wavered, caught between loyalty and shame. One of them, younger than the rest, finally spat into the dirt and muttered, "I didn't come here to beat a woman." He tugged his horse's reins, backing away into the shadows. The scarred rider cursed under his breath, then looked squarely at Eliza. "That true? He's been after your land?" Eliza raised her chin, voice steady despite the quiver in her hands. "My father built that ranch with his bare hands. It was his dying wish that I keep it. Caleb doesn't want me. He wants what the land gives: water, grass, a future." A murmur rippled through the riders. Water was gold in the desert, more precious than bullets. Naya seized the moment. "This woman does not belong to him," he said, his voice ringing with a calm fury. "No woman does. And her land belongs to her bloodline, not to a thief who hides behind fists." Caleb snarled, thrashing against Naya's grip. "You think she can run that ranch alone? She needs me." Eliza stepped forward, knife raised, her voice cutting him down sharper than any blade. "I'd rather run it into the ground myself than see you poison it." For a heartbeat, silence stretched long and taut, the fire crackling, the wind hissing through sagebrush. Then the last rider, one who had kept his rifle steady until now, snapped. His eyes, fevered with greed, fixed not on Eliza but on the promise of land and water. "Enough talk," he growled, jerking his rifle up. "If the woman won't give it to Caleb, maybe I'll take it myself." The gunshot split the night. Eliza screamed, but Naya had already moved. With lightning speed, he wrenched Caleb aside and dove, the bullet grazing his shoulder instead of tearing through Eliza's chest. The sting burned hot, blood slicking down his arm, but he stayed on his feet, knife flashing in his hand. Chaos erupted. The scarred rider cursed and swung his rifle not at Naya, but at the greedy gunman. The butt cracked across the man's jaw, sending him sprawling from his horse. "You damn fool!" The scarred rider barked. "We came for coin, not to murder women." Two other riders spurred their horses forward, rifles raised, but their aim faltered in the melee. Naya lunged at the disarmed gunman on the ground, blade pressing to his throat before he could reach for his weapon again. His eyes blazed, dark and unyielding. "Another shot," Naya hissed. Blood dripping from his shoulder, "and you will not live to see dawn." Eliza rushed to his side, one hand hovering over his wound, the other clutching her knife with grim determination. Her face was pale, but her voice was strong. "Leave him, Naya. He isn't worth your blood." The greedy gunman, trembling under Naya's blade, spat dirt from his mouth. "She's lying. You'll both die for this." But when his eyes darted toward Caleb, he found no salvation. Caleb was slumped against the wagon, bruised, gasping, humiliated. For the first time, his men saw him not as a leader, but as a broken man begging others to fight his battles. The scarred rider spat into the dirt. "I've had enough of this." He turned his horse and motioned to two others. "We're done, Caleb. You want her land so bad, take it yourself." "I'm not dying for it." With that, 3 horses thundered off into the darkness, leaving only the greedy gunman pinned under Naya's blade, and Caleb, broken but seething. The night grew still again. The fire crackled, casting long shadows of 3 figures: the warrior, the woman, and the man who wanted to own her. Naya pulled back his knife but didn't sheath it, his dark eyes never leaving Caleb. His voice was quiet now, but more dangerous than any shout. "This ends tonight. You will not touch her again." Eliza's breath hitched. She had dreamed of those words for years, of freedom, of safety. But the fear remained, crawling deep inside her bones. Caleb wasn't finished, not truly. Men like him never gave up when greed and pride burned hotter than reason. And in Caleb's bloodshot eyes, she saw the truth. He would rather die than let go. The desert wind carried a strange silence, broken only by the restless shifting of the horses and the faint crackle of dying gunfire. Naya stood tall against the backdrop of a sinking sun, his chest heaving, his bare skin streaked with dust, sweat, and thin cuts. His long black hair clung to his shoulders, dark against the glow of twilight. Around him, the canyon floor bore the chaos of the fight-trampled earth. 2 bodies sprawled in the dirt, blood staining the dry soil like rust. Eliza pressed her back against the jagged rock where she had hidden, the revolver slipping from her trembling hand. She wanted to move, to run, to do something, but her legs refused to obey. Her eyes locked on Naya, the man who had risked his life against impossible odds. For the first time in years, she felt the steady rhythm of safety in another's presence. "Are you hurt?" Naya's voice, low and edged with concern, cut through the heavy quiet. She shook her head, though her body ached from every bruise Caleb had left upon her. Her lips parted to speak, but no sound came. Instead, tears welled in her eyes, tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed when Caleb's fists had broken her. Spirit night after night, Naya crouched beside her, his dark eyes searching her face as though memorizing every detail. He reached for her hand, rough and calloused from years of survival, and brushed his thumb lightly across her knuckles. The gesture was simple, but it made her breath hitch in her chest. No man had ever touched her with gentleness before. I thought he'd never let me go," Eliza whispered finally, her voice raw. "I thought my life would just end with him." Naya's gaze hardened, not at her, but at the memory of Caleb's cruelty. "He will not touch you again." The words were not a promise, but a truth, steady and unshakable. The desert stretched endless around them, painted in violet and crimson hues by the dying light. A hawk circled above, its cry echoing through the canyon like a reminder of freedom. Yet Naya knew they were not safe, not yet. The men who had come with Caleb were not the kind to forgive a blood debt. They would regroup, and they would come again. He rose to his feet, scanning the horizon with the sharp eyes of a warrior. "We cannot stay here," he said. "Others will return." Eliza tried to stand, but her knees buckled beneath her. Without hesitation, Naya slipped an arm around her waist and steadied her. She felt the strength in him, raw, unwavering, but also the quiet respect in the way he supported her weight without making her feel weak. They began moving deeper into the canyon, following the fading light. Each step was slow, the crunch of gravel under their boots echoing in the stillness. Shadows stretched long, and the air grew cooler as night descended. At last, they came upon a narrow hollow where the rocks formed a natural shelter. Naya guided her inside, setting her gently on a flat stone. He built a small fire, the flames licking upward and casting their faces in flickering amber. Eliza watched him work, her heart caught between fear and something she could not yet name. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Naya paused, lifting his eyes to hers. The firelight made them seem even darker, pools of depth and mystery. "Because no one deserves chains," he answered. The words sank into her, heavy with meaning. For a moment, the bruises on her skin, the scars in her spirit, felt a little lighter. She drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, staring into the flames. As the night deepened, the desert grew hushed, save for the crackle of fire and the distant howl of a coyote. Eliza leaned back against the rock, exhaustion overtaking her. Her eyes fluttered closed, no fear still clawed at the edge of her mind. What if Caleb's friends found them? What if tomorrow brought more blood? Naya remained awake, sitting tall, his knife resting across his knees. His long hair shifted in the breeze, and his muscles tensed at every sound in the night. He was a sentinel carved from stone, a warrior who knew no rest. Yet as he glanced at the sleeping woman, her face softened by the glow of the fire, something stirred within him, something more powerful than duty, more dangerous than vengeance. He felt a pull, a tether that bound him to her fate. Protecting her was no longer a choice. It was a vow written in the marrow of his bones. The stars wheeled above them, cold and brilliant. Naya kept watch, but his thoughts strayed to questions he could not answer. What would dawn bring? Safety or another storm of violence? He tightened his grip on the knife, eyes fixed on the darkness. Whatever came, he would be ready. Dawn crept slowly over the desert, painting the horizon in pale gold and muted rose. The cold night gave way to a brittle silence, broken only by the crackle of dying embers at their small campfire. Naya stood at the mouth of the rocky hollow, broad shoulders silhouetted against the first light. His long black hair stirred in the breeze, tribal jewelry glinting faintly with every shift of his stance. The knife rested in his hand, a natural extension of his will. Behind him, Eliza stirred awake. Her body ached from sleep on the stone floor, but the warmth of the fire and the memory of Naya's presence kept the nightmares at bay. She blinked at his figure, a sentinel carved from dawn itself, and for the first time in years she felt the fragile flutter of hope in her chest. "Is it morning already?" Her voice was quiet, hoarse. Naya turned his head slightly, enough for her to see the sharp lines of his face in the soft light. "The day is coming," he said. His tone carried both warning and promise. Eliza pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "Will they come again?" she asked, fear threading through her words. Naya's gaze hardened as he scanned the horizon. Men like Caleb do not give up easily. Blood was spilled. They will want more. Her stomach knotted at the thought, but she saw no fear in him, only resolve. He did not speak of fleeing. He spoke of facing whatever came. By mid-morning, the desert stirred with more than wind. The sound came faint at first, a tremor of hooves rolling like distant thunder. Naya's jaw tightened. He crouched low, listening, every muscle coiled and ready. Eliza's heart hammered, and she grasped his arm instinctively. "They've found us," she whispered. Naya placed his hand gently over hers, grounding her. "Stay behind the rocks. Do not move until I call for you." Before she could protest, he was already stepping into the open, the rising sun glinting off the knife in his hand. The riders emerged from the canyon trail, 4 men this time, armed and hungry for revenge. Caleb was not among them, but his hatred rode in their eyes. Apache. One of them barked, spitting into the dirt. "You'll pay for what you did." Naya stood his ground, shirtless and scarred, a figure of raw defiance against their rifles. His long hair whipped in the wind, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. He did not flinch. "You come for vengeance," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the open space. "But vengeance will bury you here." The men sneered and raised their weapons. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Then chaos erupted. Gunfire cracked, echoing through the canyon. Naya lunged sideways, rolling into the dust as a bullet tore past his shoulder. With a speed that defied the odds, he closed the distance, knife flashing. One man fell, clutching his throat. Another stumbled backward, thrown from his horse as the warrior's blade found its mark. Eliza watched, frozen with terror and awe. The Apache moved like a storm, each strike precise, every motion fueled by a lifetime of survival. But there were too many. A shot rang out, and Naya staggered, crimson blooming across his side. No. Eliza's scream split the air. Without thinking, she grabbed the revolver from the ground where it had fallen during the fight. Her hands shook, but she lifted the gun, aimed at the man leveling his rifle at Naya, and pulled the trigger. The rider toppled from his horse. Shock etched across his face as he hit the ground. The last man, seeing his companions fallen, turned his horse and fled into the desert, dust trailing behind him like a ghost. Silence descended, broken only by Naya's ragged breathing. He dropped to one knee, blood seeping between his fingers where he clutched his side. Eliza ran to him, dropping beside his tall frame, her tears streaking through the dust on her cheeks. "Stay with me," she begged, pressing her hands over his wound. "Please, don't you dare leave me now." Naya's dark eyes met hers. Even through the haze of pain, there was fire in them still unbroken, untamed. He lifted a hand, resting it gently against her cheek. "You are free now," he whispered. She shook her head fiercely, gripping his hand. "Not without you." For a long moment, they held each other in the growing light of morning, the desert around them littered with the price of freedom. The hawk that had circled above them the night before cried once more, soaring higher into the endless sky. Naya forced himself to his feet with her help, swaying but unbowed. He sheathed his bloodied knife, his arm resting heavily on her shoulders. Together, they turned toward the open land stretching out before them. The desert had nearly broken them both. But in its vast emptiness, something stronger had been forged, something neither Caleb's fists nor his men's guns could destroy. They walked forward, not yet knowing where the path would lead, but certain of one truth. They would face it side by side. And in that truth, there was hope.